And first we'll introduce everyone in the room. So I'll ask you to start and introduce yourself.
Margo Steeves.
Margo Steeves. And I'm Sally Harris. I'm the interviewer. And also in the room,
McBain.
and
Judy, LaPorte.
And today is the
16th of April.
16th of April, 2025. And we're here at the Public Library to do an oral history with Margo. So, could you just begin by telling us your age and where you were born? And remember, you can skip any questions. So.
Oh, okay. No, I'm 85. I was born in Seymour, Connecticut.
In Seymour, Connecticut. And how did you end up coming to the Lake Sunapee area?
Ooh, my ex-husband spent summers on Lake Sunapee. Okay. And we came up here skiing when we started dating. We would come up on weekends and stay in a cabin, a huge cottage on Lake Sunapee with a bunch of other people that rented it.
Do you remember where that was?
It was in Pine. Is it called Pine Cliff? Pine Cliff. Yeah, right. It was one of the cottages there. Okay. Big old family cottage, and I think it was 3 couples that ran it, and they slept upstairs, and downstairs there were 2 huge bunk rooms, and then one for men and one for women, and that's where we stayed, and we ate breakfast. We took turns cooking breakfast and cleaning up, and they brought lunch to the mountain, and then we cooked dinner. We really had a great time. Yeah, it was a great time. But so then we started looking for property and ended up buying a little house on Sleepy Street in South Newbury.
Okay, and when was that?
Let's see, it was after we were married, so it had to be 1962. 1962. Okay. I think we found it on our honeymoon.
Okay.
Mr. Roberts, who had an antique real estate business and was a selectman at the time of Newbury, was our realtor. I think it cost $3,500.
Whoa!
It just sold for $350,000.
100 times? Is that 100?
Imagine that.
Yeah. Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah. Can you remember Mr. Roberts' first name? Because
Walter
Roberts.
What was his wife's name? I remember him saying that she could wash dishes in a thimble full of water when they first moved in. And they moved in from Long Island. And we're used to having things a little bit more not civilized, but
modern.
Yeah, modern, I guess.
So could you tell us a little bit about your family?
My personal family?
Yeah, so maybe just tell us a little bit about your parents and where they were originally from, and then about your kids. And...
Okay. My mom and dad, my father was the oldest of 4 boys. His mom was from Canada, from Nova Scotia. I mean, not Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. And she married a man named Howard Steeves, his ancestors were also from New Brunswick, Canada. They actually were settled there because of Benjamin Franklin, who owned land up there, and one of the first non-French white people there. And my family actually one of them signed the Confederation, the Articles of Confederation for Canada.
Wow.
So we go way back up there. At any rate, so that was my dad. They moved, both of them, my grandparents met I think through their church. Was the Baptist church, and not in Seymour, another town. And they married and homesteaded actually in Seymour, not Seymour, but in Beacon Falls, Connecticut, which is next door. And built a house, and across the street from them lived my grandmother's parents on one side, her brother on the other side. And there were other people that lived just a little bit farther, and they weren't related to us. Everybody else was. The 2 boys on this side, 2 boys on that side, and their families, until we all spread out. But so actually, I was born in Seymour, Connecticut, but we lived in Beacon Falls until I was in 1st grade. Okay. Then we moved to Seymour. And so that's my dad, and my mom was 1st generation Polish. Her parents came from near Krakow, Poland, and never can remember the name because it didn't really matter, I think, a lot back then. Um, but my mom was one of three, two boys, and one of the boys died very young and after he was married. The other one, Uncle Caesar, what a blessing he was, never married. And I guess he was married and his wife divorced him when he was in the war, in the Second World War, and which happened often. And, but he was, of all things, he was an ambulance driver in the Second World War. Can you imagine? Never spoke of it, never spoke of any of that. Think about what he went through. And, but he used to come and visit us all the time. He was like our surrogate dad, but we had a dad. He was funny. He played cards. He taught my daughter taught Kathleen how to do math through cards, and she's still a whiz at that. So there's that. And we lived always in Seymour. My mother ended up selling the house after we were all gone. And she moved in different places. Then she finally ended up in Texas with my youngest brother who lived there. But my sister now, I had three siblings, two boys, two brothers, and a sister. My sister lives in Westminster, Vermont, and she just turned 87. You missed her. She was here for the weekend. And my brother Howie lives in Barre, Massachusetts. He moved there from Connecticut a little while ago, he and his wife. And my other brother lives in San Antonio, Texas. So, I don't know, what else do we need
How
to know?
about tell us about your
My kids. Oh,
and,
my kids.
And a little bit about, tell us about the kids first and then what it's like raising kids in Newbury.
Ooh, well, I had 4 children and was divorced when the youngest one was he 2? I think he was turning 2. And the oldest one was a girl, Claudia, and she was born in 63. And Will was born in 65, Kathleen in 67, and Connell in 71. And Claudia now lives in Washington State. Her son, my grandson, lives in Seattle, Washington. And Claudia's about to leave for Alaska for a little visit. And so that'll be interesting. She's never been there. And she's also a poet and has published several books on poetry and won prizes for her poetry, so which is very nice. And Will lives in Bradford, New Hampshire, and has 2 children. One is a senior in high school at Kearsarge, and the other one is in 8th grade in the middle school. Both of them were on the winning ski teams for Kearsarge.
Woohoo!
They won both the middle school and the high school championships this year. Ta-da, ta-da! Yeah, we're pretty proud. And I think Braden's going to Keene State, but I don't know how long he'll stay there because we have friends that live in Montana, including my youngest son, and they're anxious for him to go out there and go to school because he's such a good skier, for one, and 2, he wants to get into the construction business and managing some kind of management. I mean, you have to go to college now for that. You used to get a job, right? Anyway, Jeff St. Cyr, who grew up with my kids, now lives in Montana with most of his brothers. One of his brothers and his mom live all out there. And he has quite a established, great construction business out there. So they're kind of hoping that Braden will go out there too. He probably will. And let's see, that's 2, 3. And Connell, Kathleen she's the next youngest. She's in Oakland, California. And she's one of those people that just got laid off, as so many people have. And is in the process of interviewing. So that's always a lot of fun. As we know, it's hard. And Connell is out in Montana, living in the woods with 3 dogs, no wife. And a good thing, I don't know who'd want to live out there where he is. I have my oldest daughter's divorced first husband is very close to Connell, and John Putnam, his name is, and he actually stopped to visit him when he was out in Montana with his daughter, who's a pre-Olympic dressage person. And he said, Margo, I went out to where he is. I found his road out that he built out into the woods. And then I came to the top of the hill, and there his place was at the bottom of the hill. Like he said, I was never so scared. It was worse than a ride at a what are they called? Roller coaster ride. At any rate, so he's out there, and he had actually had a stroke when he was 49, and it left him semi-handicapped in that one of his eyes won't focus, and his short-term memory has been damaged, and I mean, could have been fatal. They did get him to the hospital, but they didn't know what was causing it. They thought it was an aberration of the EKG machine, and it wasn't. He had a hole in his heart, which they fixed, but it was long after that damage had been done. And he also had just had 2 bones in one of his legs. I think his left leg fused because all the cartilages are gone in there. So that takes like a year to get over. So that's my 4 kids.
Talk a little bit about what it was like when you
that's
first
right.
moved to Newbury, and
Right.
what it was like with the kids.
Well, we moved into this house on Sleepy Street. There were, when we bought it, we bought it as a vacation place, and there was a really old woman that lived next to us who loved to come over and have a glass of anything that you could give her.
Was it Mrs. Eaton?
No, it was Mrs. Eaton's mother, Mrs. Sadie McDonald, who was this wonderful woman, sense of humor, smart, and she would come over and sit in a rocking chair in our house and talk to us about different stuff. And she was great. And then when we actually moved up that next summer to live there for a little bit, we didn't think we'd stay there. She was gone, and I said to Howard later, what happened to her? I never found out what happened. Well, I think she went into a nursing home. That's what he said. So maybe you can get that out of him. But she was very nice. And Martha was her daughter. And Martha was a great cook. She used to work for the, what's it called? The Pleasant Valley Inn, the Messer Inn that used to be in operation. That they used to grow all their own food. And there was, Leslie. And her mom and her family used to rent one of the cottages there.
Up on Pleasant View.
Yeah, right. And so but she cooked there in the summer. So, and she was also the cook in the school. I don't know if you remember, because you didn't go to the center school, no. And but she was a cook until the inn opened, and then she had to go there, and so there were people that would fill in. But the lunch room back then, all the farmers used to bring their excess food there, so the kids had all this great food. It was very different. And but anyway, so that was Mrs. Eaton, and she was married to Howard and had 2 children late in life. Howard was one, and then she had Aletha, and they were little kids when we moved in there, but they were the only them, and then the Heaths had two little girls, so there were 4 kids on her. We moved in, and a family of 4 kids had moved in next door, the Copelands.
Oh, yeah.
And the youngest was the same age as my oldest, my only child at that point, and Sally, same age as Sally, Sharon. And then way down at the bottom where, what was her name now? He was a selectman. Merle Rich, right, and Bertha. They lived there, and their daughter moved in with her 2 sons.
Which house were they in?
The last one down.
The one that Mr. Perkins lived in?
No,
Or
the
one that Dave Smith
Dave
lived in?
Smith lives in, right? And Dave was one of those grandchildren.
Okay, yeah.
And when his mom remarried, they stayed with Grandma and Grandpa.
Okay.
So there were 2 kids there. There were 2 in the Heath's house. There were Howard and Martha, and that family had moved next door to us by then. So they were living there. The house across the street was empty, and there was us with 1, and I was pregnant, and then there was one with 4. It was like hallelujah, you know?
Kids
And in the
everywhere.
summer, there was Sally and then Davy and other people.
Then the Caramanicas came.
Oh,
with
then the
6
Caramanicas
kids.
came, and when Copeland's moved to Florida, yeah, a family, a monk and his sister, who had been a nun, moved in, bought the house, and basically so that their sister could get out of Revere, Massachusetts in the summer. And the rule they had was you can come and stay there, but no TV, no radio, no, I don't even know if they were allowed to have a telephone. I don't remember. But it was like you're going to go up there and you're going to be outside and you're going to be entertaining yourselves. And they were awesome kids. They were, how many? 4, 6?
5 boys, 1 girl.
6 kids.
Yeah.
And then one summer they had, they entertained a young man from Switzerland, Alain.
No, that was us.
Well, he ended up there. This is a funny story. Sally, as a little kid, and her brother went to Switzerland with their mom and dad, and Mimi, the mother, had a lot of friends from Cornell, where she went to college, and a lot of them lived in Europe. And so they went and visited this family, right? And they hiked a lot, and they did all this, and they, as a thank you, when Alain, is that how you say it? When he got old enough, he was going off to college. He came here for a summer. He was going to Manhattan because Mimi lived in Manhattan, right? Oh no, Mimi lived up here in the summer. So instead of him going to the lake where he always went in the summer in Switzerland, he came to Sunapee.
And he wore a Speedo down on the dock. It was very uncool.
And he also had earrings on. And in Europe, if you wore a one earring, which the guys did, and you wore it on, wait a minute, left is right, right is left. If you were on your left side, it meant that you were queer or whatever, gay, whatever you want to call it. But here it was the opposite. So the Caramanicas used to take him into Boston all the time because he didn't want to be in South Newbury. He wanted to be in Boston. And they were all older by then, most of them, not all of them. And so they had to convince him first to change his earrings before they took him anywhere because they were getting in trouble. At any rate, that was kind of a funny story. The other great story about Alain is that after he went home, I think he was going to be a doctor, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. He sent me a postcard and to say thank you. And he sent it to Margo Hurley, house next to the post office, South Newbury, New Hampshire. And I got it.
Well, when I was up here during the summers, my friends used to send letters. We used to write letters in those days. And they just would write Sally Harris, South Newbury, New Hampshire.
And you'd get it, yeah.
Because the postmistress
Yeah,
next
and
door.
there were a lot of post offices and not many people.
Yeah.
I was thinking the other day of the South Road when we moved here. There were the house on the corner where the Muzzies lived, and then there was that empty house. No, the
Mr.
Baileys
Bailey.
lived in that house, and I won't tell you this story, the off-color story about that, and
Maybe later.
very funny, but very funny. And Bailey's, and then I think it was empty, and then the Dehanians moved in there to
Where
a house with a
Sandy
big barn.
was.
No,
There was the one at the corner of Morse Lane where the Busos lived.
Yeah,
After the
right.
Goodwillies were
the
there.
Goodwillies lived there. This is between Goodwillies and
Okay.
yeah, or maybe right after. I never can still remember. And then there was Marion Hill.
Yep.
And Mrs. Blake, and that was it.
There
And in the corner.
something on that kind of flat area before you got up to the farm. I think wasn't there someone there?
There was
Well, maybe not when.
yeah.
I remember later.
The last house on the corner there, on the corner of Newell, was empty, and that's where the Enross rented for years. And across the street, of course, was the sheep farm. Then you came back, and there was the barn that somebody bought to make into an observatory, but it was too light, and it didn't work. Too many lights still here, and there weren't that many. And I'm trying to think of what was on. There was a house on the corner, almost across from Goodwillies, set up on a hill. I don't know who lived there. Yeah, I never knew who lived there. And I think that was it. The dump, the highway department wasn't there. It was just the big sand pit where we used to play in the fall when it was cold out. And all the swallows used to nest in there. That was one of the really cool things about South Newbury. I probably told you this before, but at night, in the summer, the end of the day, all of the telephone wires that went down Sleepy Street on the corner there, full of swallows, all different kinds of swallows. Because we had cliff swallows, we had bank swallows, we had tree swallows, we had swifts, you name it. If there was a swallow, we had it. And they'd all congregate in groups. It was full. And they'd just sit there and talk the whole time, gossip. And one by one, things happened. Sand pit went, and bank swallows had no place to go. But for a long time, we had what we called rotten rock in our driveway, to make it into hardpack. And the swallows, the cliff swallows, used to come down and take mouthfuls of it after the storm, and they would go up to Chafee's and make nests underneath the eaves.
Oh, that's funny.
And I remember one time Alton calling me down, coming down and saying, "You've got to come see this." So I walked up, and one of them was having trouble building. It kept falling apart. He said, "I've never seen the likes of this. What's ever going to happen to this bird? It can't make a nest." Yeah, but they would be lined with them, under the eaves. Yeah, it was so cool.
What else can you tell us about life in South Newbury, like over the course of the year? What kinds
Of when I was there?
Yeah.
Well, it was busy. There was traffic in the morning when people were going to work, and a lot of people didn't have jobs back then. If they had jobs, it seemed to me that they worked either for the town or the state, because they had a state shed here in South Newbury, and they also had the park, and they had Kearsarge Park, one in Wilmot and one in Warner, and then of course the one in Sutton. I forgot about that one. So it was a hard time for people. People had one car. Sometimes they'd have two, an old truck or something. But in the morning, before people left, they would be at the post office. And then again, when people got out of work or after school, they would be at the post office. So that would be our high point of the day for traffic. And the rest of the time, it was very quiet. Well, you remember that, I'm sure. And the kids, we had strict rules that if you were going to, everybody had a bike, of course, because the dump was full of old bikes that you could recondition if you wanted to. But you had to go with the traffic. And the kids hated it because that meant they had to go up the hill. From Sleepy Street goes up, from Smith's house up to the corner, you have to go up the hill. Whereas if you went the other way, you could go down the hill and go really fast. But you couldn't, you'd be going against traffic, and it was just too unsafe. So anyway, that was the rule. And every night there would be a parade of bikes. I have a wonderful photograph of all the kids in the village on their bikes, waiting to be released for the big moment when there would be a parade around the village. It was really awesome. It was awesome. So many kids. Yeah.
How about, can you talk a little about the post office? What was that like?
The post office had little boxes, and I remember Dottie Perkins, who was the postmistress. It was in her house. It was in what is now a bedroom in the house, same house. She had bought, at an auction or something, somewhere, they were throwing out these old mailboxes from some disused post office, and she bought them and put them in South Newbury. And so you had a little box, and it didn't cost a lot of money because there was no rural delivery back then. Everybody had a post office box. So it was a way of meeting your neighbors and talking. It was really an important part of our life. Yeah. Because there was no newspaper.
Was she the postmistress the whole time you were in South Newbury?
No, because she actually, I guess she was, because when she retired, she had either Alzheimer's or dementia, probably Alzheimer's. I think they closed it after her.
Okay. But when you arrived here, she was there.
Oh yeah,
already.
yeah. This is another funny story. My brother gets out of the army my youngest brother, who now lives in Texas. He was stationed in Turkey for 4 years, was in the army, and doing eavesdropping on the Russians is what he was doing, to be honest. And but anyway, he came to visit, and so I said to him on Sunday morning, "Hey, Al, would you mind getting the paper? It's at the post office. Do you mind walking over there?" No. He was gone like an hour and a half, 2 hours. I was really getting worried. So I think I sent Warren out to look for him, and I asked him to go out. And he came back, and he was looking for a post office. So that was a late lesson in how to find a post office in New Hampshire. You look for a mailbox. The only mailbox you'll ever see is in front of a post office.
That's funny. There used to be one, didn't there?
Yes, there was. Yeah, there was. Because I think she might have been closed for a little bit during the day. I don't remember really, because that was the kid's job to go over. Because I hate combinations. I'm never good at it. And I'd make a terrible bank robber. And so that was their job. And they loved it. They loved being, and they'd have to buy stamps. And it was a way for them to learn stuff. Unlike your mom, who got to go down to the post office when she was a little kid. And if it was winter, she got cocoa.
Because it was Mrs. Jim's store.
Mrs. Jim's store, yeah. Even when we first moved up here, if people asked me where I was from, and I said South Newbury, and if they were older, is Mrs. Jim still there? That's the first thing that they'd say, not where is it. Is she still there? It was famous. Yeah. And when Howard Eaton was in 8th grade, there were so many kids in the center school in 8th grade that they sent them down here to school. And he probably told you that. And they used to walk up to Mrs. Jim's for lunch. Did he tell you that?
Oh, no.
Wayne did too.
Yeah.
He went to Mrs. Jim's for lunch.
So he probably was he in that same class, I wonder?
Oh, he was older than Howard, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
like how much, do you think?
He would be 90.
So 15, Howard's about 74, I think.
Something like that. Oh, yeah, well, that was a full school until after the war, they made that into the only school. The center school became the only school.
Yes.
Yeah. Huh. And we're painting down there now on Thursday afternoons, 1 to 3.
Yes,
If you know anybody that likes to paint, we're doing it for fun.
That's great.
Yeah, no, for fun. Yeah, it's a great space, wonderful space.
And your paintings are so good.
Oh, thanks. I've got a bunch of them right now. They're not finished. I'm thinking, I need someone to tell me what is this or that. Tell me this or that. And I was going to ask the guy that delivered my wood today, but he took off too fast.
Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
What about, so you mentioned the telephone lines with the Swallows. Talk about the telephone.
Oh, the telephones were a riot because we had party lines. And there were 4 people on every party line. And one of the people in our little village here was very good at picking up the phone and listening.
I think she was on our party line.
Well, she got moved. She got moved a lot. And because people would complain. And my mom was so bad. She would be on the phone and she'd be talking to somebody and she'd know that you could hear when somebody picked up.
Did the last name begin with
Click.
C? Is that who we're talking about or someone else? Oh, or last name H?
H, yeah.
We had a different
and my mother she'd be so nasty to her.
So who was on you had 4 people, were they all Sleepy Street people on your?
I think there was that person.
Yeah.
Very luckily, it was Pat Copeland.
Okay.
So if I was at Pat Copeland's house, which I often was, or she was at mine, we knew when our phone rang, we could just pick it up. It was awesome. I didn't mind it at all. My mother thought it was terrible. I didn't think it was bad at all because we had a party line in Connecticut until it got to be so sophisticated that we got our own line. But it changed because people complained. Sometimes, I can't even tell you. But it was best when it was and we cried when we lost each other on the party line. And then it became 2 people on a party line. Then it became 1. So, and I actually, when we moved into that house, we had an old phone in there that you had to crank up.
Wow.
And when they came in and put in the new phone, they took the phone part, but they left the box, which was a little generator, a hand-operated generator. So Mr. Wait a minute, Newell was an inventor. Harold Newell was an inventor. So one of his oldest daughter, who was your age, asked me if I would let her father have the box. So I said, well, I'd like to keep the box, but I'll give you the inside. She said, that's what he wants. So I don't know what he did with it. I never did find out. But I would like to have known. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I
Yeah.
wonder if Doris would know. He had 26 patents.
I know he did. Yeah. And did Doris tell you that her mother was an opera singer?
She did. Or a grandmother, I think she said.
Oh, might have been.
Yeah.
Somebody in her family. But she's a great voice.
Were you a member of any groups or organizations?
Well, there was a PTA.
Okay.
I think parent teachers. PTC. We didn't call it what everybody else called it.
PTO, probably.
PTO,
Parent
yeah.
Teachers Organization.
Right. I think
Is
so.
that when your kids were
Yeah,
in Newbury? What was the school like from your perspective?
Oh, it was awesome. It was so awesome that when we had kids come up from Manhattan, they wanted to go to school because it was first, second, and third grade, and then fourth and fifth. And they were old teachers who'd been taught the old way how to teach. Meaning to me, everybody has their own way of learning. And I know my father lived with a woman for the last 15 years of his life who had been a teacher in Vermont. She'd gone to the normal school and then, of course, took all the classes and the stuff. She ended up with a master's. She ended up, as only women did, she ended up being the teacher of 8th grade and the principal of 8 grades in Vermont. And she taught me a lot about teaching, a lot. And that was one of the big things, Margo, everybody learns their own way. And I think about that all the time now. Even as older people, we all have our way of learning. But so there were three grades and same teachers until I think Kathleen went, and then the first and second, third grade teacher retired, and they got somebody new who really wasn't prepared to teach them. She was a good teacher, but she ended up teaching 5th grade, I think, in one of the middle schools.
So after your kids were there, what schools did they go to next?
Well,
Newbury?
when Claudia finished, she went to middle school, which was in New London,
Yeah.
and Will as well, and Kathleen. Yeah, they all went to New London.
Okay.
Connell started in New London because I was working then, and it was safer for him to be up there than waiting on a bus or whatever. And but I think he would have been better off going to Newbury if things had been different. And at some point, you don't get to make those choices. They're made for you. So,
What kind of work were you doing?
well, when the kids were little and I had no income really, there's a rule that if you have child support and you don't see any of that, you can apply for help from the state, and they will pay you that, which is what they did for us. It was nothing though, and paid our rent, I think, basically, and maybe our bills. But I cleaned houses, I did surveys, I did, you name it, if it was
You
something.
did census taking, right?
I did take the census, and I ended up working for them for a long time doing where all of the unemployment figures come from until our latest. And, I mean, it doesn't seem like any of the unemployment figures that reflect all the people that have been fired from the government, they don't seem to be included in those figures that we hear about. But anyway, and I did that for a long time until I found out 2 things. One, that if you have an accident or something happens, you get a flat tire, they wouldn't pay for that. It had to come out of your pocket. And I thought, wait a minute. And then the other thing that happened, because I was doing surveys, and they were always, was a section of New Hampshire that reflected a larger section of the country. So I'm in Claremont, in downtown Claremont, and I'm in this building, beautiful old building that has now been torn down, brick building, with the second floor had a beautiful patio outside, not a patio.
Balcony or something?
What?
A balcony?
Yes, a balcony. And if you went in, there's this huge room and this beautiful stairway that went up, curving, and all these rooms off it. It was just beautiful and falling apart. And I went in and I said, there were people sitting downstairs. I don't know where the kitchen was. And I said, I'm here to see so-and-so. And I guess I didn't know who it was, but such and such a room or something. So they told me to go up the stairs, second door on the left or something like that. So I go up. There's very few lights. And the door is kind of open, and I knock, and there's no answer. There's a light bulb hanging by the wire. And I walk in, and I think, no. I back out. And I walk down the stairs and I leave, and no one bats an eye. All the people down there, no one says anything. They keep talking. It's like, and so at that, I said, you know what? I quit. Because I thought, you know what? That's not safe.
No.
And if you don't get an interview, you get points off. And it's like, yeah.
Wow.
So I thought, no more. So I don't know. I used to do cooking things. You go into I don't think they do that anymore, but I used to cook in supermarkets.
Oh, like demonstrations?
Yes, demonstrations, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, did that. A friend of mine used to do it. She did in California for Cuisinart when they were brand new. That had to be fun. I never got anything exciting as that. And what else did I do? Oh, I don't know.
You worked for Mesa for a while, didn't you?
That was I went to work. I went to work at Procter. Was an assistant administrator. Assistant. What do they call that? Admissions. Sorry, I'm still foggy from that accident. It just really bothers me. And so there was. I did that, and then which was great because Will and Kathleen both got to go to school there for free. And then I left there and I went to work for Matarazzo Design in Concord, which was so much fun. Working with all these artists, the landscape architects. Oh my word, they were fun. And then I went to work for the union, for state employees, and I worked there and worked my way up to become a field representative, which mostly I did dispute resolution. And although I was supposed to do other stuff, but I was better at that than the other stuff. And then I retired and went to work for Mesa because I retired with health benefits, so I could work for a little bit of money. And then I left there and went to where did I work after that? I went to work for Borland of Germany. They make cosmetics. They make a great cosmetic for people who have acne. You'd never, ever know it. Ever know it. It's probably all retin-A. I don't know what it is. They don't tell you what their secret formula is. But I worked there, and then I worked for LS Lake Sunapee Protective Association. Yeah, for a little bit. Ran the office. And then they made it I was just part-time, and they made it a full-time job, and they hired somebody else to do that. And I went back to work for the union. And then when I was 69, I came down, I got really sick with Lyme, and I ran out of sick leave. So that was the end of that job. I was then certifiably retired.
Let me just look here.
So, that's what people did, right? They did what you could do.
Yeah.
What you could do to put food on the table. One time I actually served Thanksgiving dinner at Sandy Gove's house. I was the server, and I did the dishes.
Why was that? They were having a party? And
They had invited, who was the woman that lived at the end of your road?
Oh, Barbara Jones?
Barbara Jones and the guy that did all the work for her.
Oh, Arthur. Les.
Les, yes.
Yeah.
Who used to be on the town crew.
Yeah, after she
Yeah.
got married, he left and he went to work for them. And but anyway, they came for dinner, and Sandy wanted to sit down and enjoy them, so she hired me to do that.
Wow.
It's a good thing I knew how to do that. I was like in charge of the dining area, when I was in college, I was in a sorority, and we had fancy meals at night. And I was in charge of making sure everybody did everything right. All the that came in handy too when I waitressed in the summer.
And she had all 5 children at that point?
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know if they were at the table, to be
Oh.
honest. I think it was.
Just the 4 adults?
I think it might have been. It's a long time ago. Yeah. It's a long time ago. I just gave actually a bunch of peonies to her twin daughter because I had to sign their red pink peonies on the side of the road, and she came and she actually even dug them up, which I was very grateful for. So,
That's a plus.
yeah.
What did you do for fun, recreation?
Oh, you know what? I had 4 little kids, no husband. It was like not a lot of that. I don't even know if we played, the kids and I. Really don't even remember. I have a feeling that there wasn't enough of that. Not enough of playing or talking. Of course, my generation, we were brought up not to talk anyway. I don't know. You probably were the same. I don't know if you were lucky enough to have parents that actually liked to talk and visit with each other.
Well, not when we went somewhere to visit. We were silent.
Yeah.
At home we did.
Well, we weren't really, we were not, my family was not talkers.
Oh, yeah.
And so actually in the summer, it was going to the dock with friends, you know. The dock on Sunday was our joy because all the kids would be there, all the parents, and we would share on New York Times, Sunday Times. We'd go around the whole dock. And back then it was mostly us. When I look at pictures, there were very few other people. And you see pictures of the dock and it's so different. You know, there's like a couple of trees and the dock, water, very few cars. So different. And so it was mostly, and as when you were a little kid and we would get in your mother's Volkswagen and there would be 6 little kids in the Volkswagen, Mimi and I in the front. The door would open and we would get out and then all these little kids with all their stuff, their pails and their stuff. Oh gosh, it was fun. So we did that, and of course we used to go to swimming lessons. So we would start at Blaisdell, then we would go to Massasecum, and then we would go to Sunapee. And Sunapee was always very cold. And the better you got, the earlier your class was, and the colder it was. And so it was not the favorite place of the kids to go.
No, it wasn't.
And I know how to swim. I don't have to go anymore. Anyway, but then Blaisdell was closed to us. It became private. So we started going over to Keyser. And then Massasecum, and then Sunapee. And then Keyser had that problem with the effluent from the sewage system in New London. So we stopped going there and was just left with those other 2. But you probably learned to jump off the rock down at Massasecum, right? To dive off the rock?
Yeah, but before that, off the end of the dock at Blaisdell.
Oh.
Which was not very deep, but that's where we first learned to dive, and then off the rock at Massasecum.
Wow. I don't remember.
But really off the dock in Newbury.
Yeah. In our town report, there's a lot of pictures in there, but there was one of kids jumping off the dock at sunset. I think it was at Blodgett Landing. I don't think it was Newbury's because it didn't look right. But boy, did that bring back memories. And one of the wonderful things was when the kids were in school, in up here, when they got to be, I'm trying to think, even, Kathleen started school there. Anyway, I would stop when it was during lunchtime. I would go when school first started. I would go up with lunch and take them out of school, and we would go down into the dock for an hour. It was great.
That's fun.
Yeah, yeah. And you could look for shiners and different things because the frost top wasn't there. But then the frost top came in, and that changed everything because there was food. There was ice cream and stuff. That was the beginning, I think, of changing it to becoming what it is now, a commercial place.
Can you talk at all about the general store up here?
Well, I know that when we first started coming up in the winter, we would go there because it was a big place to get real sausage. They used to make sausages. Mr. What the heck was his name?
Larson,
Pardon me?
Arthur Larson.
Arthur Larson. Yeah, he used to make sausages, and but that's about all. And then I remember these two gentlemen that would show up with their horse-drawn
Oh, yes.
wagon. We called them the
Rollins.
Smith brothers, the Rollins,
Rollins.
which is like a really big name in New Hampshire. Their ancestor was the governor and all this and that, and their relative now is a select person in New London. She used to be the head of Health and Human Services when I was working. Always a pleasure to work with, and yeah, but they weren't anything bad. It's just that they had beards. They looked like the cough drops. Smith. That's what we used to call them.
That's pretty funny.
They were very kind. They were very nice. But yeah, that was another interesting thing. And of course, back then there was also the Grange in South Newbury, and they used to have fairs every summer. And they made fudge. They had all this, they had produce from all these different farms that they had around. There were a lot of farms, and they would have contests who would have the best this and the best that, but they had fudge. That was the big draw of my children. Fudge, sometimes pinucci. Yeah. And they would have a little flea market there sometimes. I remember buying a bureau there that I needed desperately. I still have it. Refinished it. It was, I think, chartreuse. Took the paint off it. Yeah.
Are there any people that stand out in your mind as sort of people that you think of when you think of Newbury?
I think of Mrs. Eaton, Edith Eaton. Yeah, she was such a wonderful help to me. She was always smiling. And she told me she grew up in Nova Scotia. And she ended up here because she was such a good cook. She was hired by somebody who owned a yacht that used to, I guess, it was a place that people would go to.
Wow.
A lot of them would go up to Labrador and stay there in the summer. And but anyway, they hired her, and she came down here and somehow met Howard's father and got married to him. But she was hunchback, and couldn't have been well, all that. And she said she thought it was because during the influenza epidemic during the war, that everybody in her house or the farm that she lived on was sick. And she was like 11, and she had to take care of everything, them, and all the animals, and all the gardens, and all that stuff. And she said, I just never got over it. And but she was so kind, so, why didn't this work when I made, why did this not work? Why did this not work? She always had it. She always could figure out what I did wrong. And then when the Messer farm closed, she ended up working at the Anchorage in Sunapee in the summer. And so after Sunday, on Sundays, my husband would take the kids to church, and I got to do the laundry. It was very nice. And because they had a laundromat, I think they still do in Sunapee. And I would do the laundry with Mr. Toohey, who would let his wife sleep on Sunday morning. He'd be doing the laundry. They had 4 or 5 kids, boys, mostly one girl. And as you probably know, you must know her.
I don't actually. They're the shanty Tuohys.
Yeah, and she is involved with the library. So.
And with writing for
Oh, is she?
the Mountain, and yeah.
Well, she used to write. Yeah, she used to work for the New York Times, and so did her husband. Yeah, and but anyway, and we were very proud of that. I mean, I used to see it all the time. I mean, I knew them. I used to know her as a kid, and then again when I worked for Mesa, Matt Toohey, one of her brothers, worked in the finance end of Mesa. It's awesome. Funny guy. What a good writer he is. Oh, my word. Really good writer. and he's in charge of all the money for all of the TUI restaurants.
Okay.
They live in Sunapee now too, but and now I've lost my train of thought.
We were talking about Mrs. Eaton.
Mrs. Eaton went to work for the Anchorage, and we would go in and have after church and after the lunch, blah blah. We'd end up meeting there, and she would bring out the insides of the donuts because she'd make homemade donuts. Can you imagine homemade donuts at the Anchorage? And she'd be saving them for my children.
Oh.
Yeah.
She was very kind. When Terica went to school, Wade was just heartbroken. And so he'd ride the bus with her.
Right.
He was only 2.
Yeah.
He'd ride the bus with her
Yeah.
to school and sit in the class for a while, color and so forth. And then he'd go out and she would give him a carton of milk and either a banana or a cookie if she was thinking. And then I'd go down and get it.
That's really
So yeah, she was very sweet.
You know, that school was so awesome.
Yeah.
There was a man who came once a week, I think, or maybe once a month, I can't remember. And he'd give piano lessons.
Oh yeah, both my kids took from Miss
Yeah.
Pepper.
Right? And Claudia, my oldest, did too. And she used to practice in the Friendship House.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a piano then. We did later, but not then. And, but he was also, he shared a room with, I think, Will. Will was pushed off the road and was coming down on his bike. A car pushed him off the road and he fell off.
Remember that. Yeah.
And he walked all the way home with his bike. And so he spent the night in the hospital because we didn't know if he had he probably had a concussion, but I'm sure he did, but they wanted to make sure he'd be okay. And I learned what to do about that after that. And because it happened to Connell too on his way home. And but anyway, he shared a room with that man. And I said to him, "Oh, you're so wonderful." Blah. He said, "I have a hearing aid. I turn it on. I turn it off, and I say to them, 'Very good, very good.'"
That's great.
That's all they needed.
Yeah.
That's all they needed.
That's wonderful.
And somebody told me, one of the teachers told me that they always asked. There were some kids that they insisted have lessons, even if they couldn't afford them. They would pay. He would take care of them, and it helped them learn to read because of the 2 hands.
It also helps with math. Playing the piano helps with math.
Oh, music and math go
Yeah.
together. Yeah, they really do. Yeah. Who was telling me? This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it was on the radio, and they were talking about teaching kids and how difficult it is today. And that this woman was talking to a math teacher, one of the teachers, about her son, and he's not doing that well. Yes, but you know what? He can do integers, and he's only in 1st grade, or something to that effect. And the woman said, "I don't even know what integers are. What are they?" But he would not write, wouldn't do it. But so yeah, they're very close. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we could continue to talk for hours and hours, but we're close to an hour, so
Oh,
I'm
okay.
kind of feeling like we should start to wrap it up, just because the file size will be so big.
Oh yeah, right,
But,
yeah.
So maybe we'll close with: is there anything that you'd like to say to future generations about life in Newbury during the time you've been here?
Just changed a lot. Yeah, and I think very luckily that Martha and the Edens and myself and Braden, Darren Finneral, who's moved into the village, the 3 of us, have been very close, and it kind of is a core. But everyone else that moves in, it takes them a long time to even open their door and say hello. Very interesting. If they're coming from the city, it's so different, and it's not something that they don't seem to know that this is a very nice thing to have. It's curious.
That community sense of
Yeah,
community.
the sense of community. And it's like that not just on Sleepy Street, although, people that moved into Darren's old house, I've never even met them yet, and they've been there almost a year. The curtains are always down, and that wonderful thing about that house is if you have the curtains up in this winter, it heats your whole house, because the sun shines on that road all day long. And but they haven't noticed that. And then there's, Heath's house keeps changing with the different Pickmans that move in and out. And David and Jennifer are wonderful, but they're never home. She's working. He manages to be. I think his mother she's taking care of his mom in a lot of ways, and so and the people on the other side of me have 2 little kids. So hopefully that will bring some kind of camaraderie, community. The husband's very excited because he has found everything he needed for his house at the dump. Well, we all have.
The magic of the Newbury dump.
It just opened. I was there to take my stuff up on Monday, and I didn't even know it was open. And there were 5 picture frames in excellent shape with mats and everything. It's like, oh,
The magic of the
yeah, right, right.
swap shop.
So there's that. I was going to tell you about all the different things that went on in the village, but I think you probably already know all of that. Like the.
Well, I don't. We'd all love to, but I am worried about.
We could do a
going to-
part 2.
We might
maybe.
need to do.
Yeah.
Would you?
No, I don't mind at all.
We
I
could
think
do
it's
part 2,
really
yeah.
important to know how
Okay.
what a vibrant little community South Newbury.
Well, why don't
is.
we plan on doing a part
Yeah.
2?
Yeah, that would be great.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Margo. This
Oh,
has
you're
been
welcome.
awesome. Yeah.
Oh, it's fun. It's
We
fun to
appreciate
talk
it.
about.
And we'll
it.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2 then.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Yes, and keep writing your stories in the Swinippy. I love reading your stories.